I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist,
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
and this is When East
Meets West.
Well, everyone's looking for ways that they can grow. And I know that, well, maybe not everybody, but certainly
I don't
but certainly people that come into our office.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's unfortunate. That's unfortunately not true, but lots of people are. Yes.
Well, I think we're in a time and a culture, and in this given space of time, more people today, right? Like more retreats, like our episode we did. There are people looking more for growth, to the point where I've been doing executive coaching for a long time in my practice, and so now I started to call it a executive growth consultant.
Oh, very nice. Very fancy title there. I like.
It's not, because I don't know what it is, but it reflected more of what I was doing. So today, Nikki, we're going to talk about growth, self-growth.
Great. And I think what Pete and I were interested in with regards to this topic is, and this is something that I want to start by, what's so wonderful about it is, especially with, I would say, Gen Z, there's so much more willingness, openness, acceptance of self-growth as a not just something nice to have, but like a necessary part of being a human. And that, of course, factors into sort of the ongoing work to destigmatize, taking care of one's mental health. I mean, I definitely would say, like 15 years ago when we were in grad school, this, I couldn't have predicted like sort of the, explosion of like discourse around that. And that's, and that's of course, like really lovely to see as a psychologist. I'm like, it's cool that I hear people tell me they want to go to therapy and they are asking for therapist referrals. It's not like a, and I know it's going to vary obviously based on your community and your family and all that. But I would say on the whole, the trend is certainly in that direction.
Way less stigmatized than it once was, for sure. I think especially I see that in the sports world. It is not like it used to be. I mean, people will, be talking about what time they have my appointment in the locker room. Whereas in the past, it would be like hiding to try and like sneak away into the psychologist's office. So it's a time for that. So what are some ways that you help people kind of manage, or, as behaviorists, we definitely kind of have like a treatment plan that outlines steps towards
self-growth. Yeah. Well, I think that it's interesting. Like, so yes, I mean, I could certainly talk about like the treatment plan. I mean, I think we've spent a time talking about that. I don't know if anyone wants to hear me go through all my treatment plans, but I think something that's I've found interesting is that as therapies become more accepted in the culture, there's also this funny thing that human brains do where, brains, as I always say, can get sticky about anything. And so that's kind of like gotten put on a pedestal. And so what I've found myself often doing now in therapy is reminding people that this is just one way to evolve, right? Like I'll say like, this is Western psychology. That's what I say. I'm like, this is Western psychology. I'm like, and that's great. I'm like, obviously I'm a therapist. Like I am in support of Western psychology, but there are tons of ways to evolve. Like, first of all, through Eastern spiritual practices, which have been around thousands of years, through other religious and spiritual communities. I love to talk about 12-step programs. I mean, which have been around since the 30s, and they are awesome. I mean, it's just like amazing self-growth work. And I just think that's important to know that, like, and again, because look, therapy is we could do a whole other episode on this. It can be expensive, hard to, like, especially COVID, hard to find a qualified therapist for what you're looking for. Just whatever. It's not that, unfortunately, it's not always as accessible as we would like it to be. And I think it's just important for people to know, like, it's not the only way to evolve as a human is in Western psychology.
No. And there's, I mean, I'm sure I don't know if it'd be nice if we had the stats, but the self-help books have skyrocketed in terms of like availability.
Sure.
That section is huge. Because there is a need for it. And to your point, it's because we could be expensive, so psychology, going to therapy is expensive. So it's a privilege. There's not enough psychologists. I mean, it's definitely a national endemic, where we do not have enough psychologists, psychiatrists who do the medication to treat what we need in today's world. So there are ways to do it for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, have you found that where there's, maybe sometimes like a putting, and again, I want to be really
Hmm.
clear to listeners. I'm not trying to negate what we do or say
Yeah.
that this, that it isn't needed. It
Right.
absolutely is. But I just want to make sure that we're all also keeping in mind that like, this is not, I don't want therapy to then become a way to sort of like elevate oneself against other people that don't have access to therapy.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah. Well,
that's
the
sort of what
brain, I
I'm,
mean, of course our brains want to do that,
that's
but
what I'm
yeah.
saying. That's what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't. I mean, especially in cognitive behavioral therapy, which you and I always the first session I say my job is to not have a job. So I'm always
Mm-hmm.
trying to get people to not be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. And so that's one thing to be
Mm-hmm.
mindful of. It's like
Mm-hmm.
growth. And so from an Eastern perspective, growth is
Mm-hmm.
forever.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
You know,
that's right.
because what historically they taught about enlightenment. And so I think when
Mm-hmm.
you're reading about Buddhism, you think once the Buddha received enlightenment, that was it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case, because once you think you've been enlightened, um, you're not.
Well, also, isn't it one of my favorite sayings is I hope I'm not butchering this, so tell me if this is right, but is something to the effect of like, first enlightenment and then the laundry or something like that, right? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
which I love, which,
yeah,
for listeners,
yeah,
it basically just means like, even if you've, had a spiritual awakening, it's like, we're still living in this human life on earth, and we've got to take the next step and do the next thing.
absolutely. But also, what are we doing it for? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
key, because a lot of people in the West, the growth is for self-improvement. And
Mm-hmm.
the East would not really
Yeah.
look too much for achievement.
Yes.
We're just growing. We're not trying to grow our bank account or grow our access to
or
whatever it is.
or be fixed. I think
Right.
that's the thing,
Yes, I
because it's
like
like,
that. Yep.
because and this is, of course, I'm going to keep like throwing in like the little kernels of truth. It's like, again, I'm not
Please.
trying to say that you can't, if you come to see a psychologist because you have obsessive compulsive disorder, or you're in a major depressive
Hmm.
episode. Of course, it's important to want to go and get the tools necessary to stabilize your symptoms,
Yeah.
right? Like, that would be, ridiculous for us to say like, no, that's not an important part of what we do. Of course it is. we
Of
have we
course.
have we have science that can help,
Yeah.
but really is like alleviate suffering,
Yeah.
absolutely. Just like when you go to your physician and I
Hmm.
don't know, you have a high fever and they're like, we want you to take an Advil to bring it down.
Right.
So we have things to do. It's just that, being a human, we don't fix being a human. We don't
No.
fix struggle.
Right.
And I think that that's like, to your point, Pete, it's like, we can in a Western framework really
Yeah.
think of therapy as like a means to an end. It's like, I'm going to do therapy, and then I wouldn't say the folks I work with tend to do this, but it could be like, I'm good,
Yeah.
I'm fixed. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, but maybe you're like good for now. And it's like, and then you're going to keep growing in your life. And
Exactly.
maybe you don't come back to therapy, but you continue to grow through like reading that you do, or
Yes.
spiritual practice, or
Yeah.
I don't know, like elders in your family,
Yeah.
then they're with give you wisdom. I don't know. There's like so many versions of this.
Many versions that I joke with my clients. I'll say, there's no certificate at the end of this.
Yeah, right.
There's no
right.
diploma. There's no
Right.
certificate. We'll
Right.
do it together. When you arrive, you arrive. And to your point, it never ends. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think when I first started on this journey, and also like in the East in Buddhism, there's they
Mm-hmm.
focus a lot on the path.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
whether it's the middle path, which is
Mm-hmm.
finding that gray area of things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or the
Mm-hmm.
eightfold path of how to
Mm-hmm.
live.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the vision of path, because we're all on it, and we're on
Mm-hmm.
it together. We're walking on it, and there's no end, which
Mm-hmm.
can feel really overwhelming at times.
Mm-hmm.
And then also it's beautiful, and this is where I've now arrived in my life, where it's just an opportunity to reset. It's like another new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about just you always say like return to it.
Mm-hmm. Return to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's all, like every you always have a chance to return to it. No matter
Mm-hmm.
if you just mess something up,
Right.
if there was something big in your life that just happened that feels really
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming, that's growth. So also
Mm-hmm.
being able to during those moments say, Nikki, this is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's growth.
Yeah, and it's like, and how as individuals we evolve it's like, and this is really, I think, the message Pete and I want to communicate today. There's so many ways to do that. And so I mean this, and I say this to patients all the time. It's like I feel very honored that people like let me into their world and let me, I'll speed the path. I'll say and like walk next to you, like and help you and support you and give you tools. And I also want to say and I honor that there's lots of ways to move through that evolution in our lives. I think there's just so many, there's a lot of wisdom out there. Let me put it that way. There's a lot of wisdom to be had out there that we can encounter. We don't know it all. I certainly don't know everything. Western psychology certainly doesn't know everything. Eastern philosophy doesn't know everything. Nobody knows everything. And I think that's another thing where we as humans are looking for who's the person, who's the thing that's going to give you the answer.
I love that you just said that. So thank you, because I know nothing. When I really honest.
I'm like, know. See, I would say, here I go. It's like, it's more like, no, you know something, but we don't know. No one, but we'll never know everything.
No, and the problem, especially in the West, is that we're seeking that, or socially we're trying to be the person that does know everything, which is super problematic. And that's what that's what we say a lot in this podcast of like, how do I just non-judgmentally stay curious and listen to something? Because it's also growth. Have you ever had an argument with a really good friend of yours and just listened? And that's hard. Like,
it's super hard.
Yeah, because we want to be right. We want to try and pin it on the person. But there is nothing. And so all of that, contributes to growth. Yeah.
And so, again, it's very dialectical in that, in order to learn more and gain knowledge, you both hold the knowledge that you're taking in and building while simultaneously making space for the not knowing, and that you'll never know everything. And so that's the path. And that's the returning back to that practice, because we'll always default towards wanting to know or wanting to be certain or wanting to be right. That's just, it's just these pesky human brains we got here.
Beautiful neurons. I was telling a story recently where that there's always, I was with my teacher recently, and we were, talking about in Daisan, which is the time where you sit one-on-one with your teacher, and sometimes I bring him a koan, or it's just something that I'm reading.
Your Zen teacher.
My Zen teacher.
Yes. Yes.
And he said, he said to me, "You can't train a galloping horse." And of course I just laughed, and then I wanted to write it down, and I was like, "I'm that horse, aren't I, Roshi?" Because I'm one of the youngest students he's ever had, and so there's certain things about me that are very different. It's also a different world, because traditionally there was a brick and mortar kind of Zendo that people would go to, that you would do some teachings, and I do think that when East meets West and some of the things that we do in social media. By we, I mean I, not you. Those are ways of trying to spread some of the teachings, and that leads to self-growth. So for me, it's meditation is self-growth, trying to, when East meets West is self-growth, and really just trying to slow the horse down, because we cannot learn when we're galloping.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that. I'm going to say that, but the galloping horse. And I just hope that in this current era where people are talking about, obviously it's it started with talking about mental health, but I think we could say it's talking about their humanness, talking about their struggles, it's that then there's more room to not just talk about going to therapy, which again, obviously I'm very, very happy about that and grateful that there's been such loud voices now, supporting that. But that it also creates room for people just to recognize there's all kinds of ways to evolve as a human and work with the struggles that we have. And like I said, there's a lot of wisdom out there. There's a lot of wisdom.
Lots of wisdom. And I shared some of that with you right before we got on today. And we're almost out of time already. But that was about, from the Pink fan page where she was just being interviewed and said, just don't be mean to people. She probably said a profanity in there. I'm trying to keep us G-rated, right?
I don't think she said the profanity. I said the profanity.
That may have been you.
That was me. That was me.
Yeah.
I said the profanity. But yeah, but don't. Be kind to other people. Be kind to other people, and that's part of self-growth too, I guess.
That's right. Being kind and self-growth. So for all you out there, thanks for tuning in. And I'll leave you with this quote: accept both compliments and criticism. It takes both sun and rain for a flower to grow.
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economo.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economo and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.